I am going to call on our first speaker, and our first speaker is Dr. Rufus Poliah, and she's a Chief Director of the National Assessment and Public Examination from the Department of Basic Education. And so he's well informed, he's a wise man, and please do take time, listen to him and what he's going to present. Can we put our hands together as we welcome Dr. Rufus?
Thank you, Pastor Mongezi, and good morning to all our young people, and good morning to our pastoral team that are here, Pastor Chris, Pastor George, and the organizers of this particular event. I must say that I'm intimidated standing here. I'm accustomed to seeing Pastor Thamo, Pastor Chris, Pastor Mongezi, and Pastor George, and I never anticipated that on one Saturday morning I will be here. And I'm also a little bit intimidated because the last time I was in a classroom, Pastor Chris, was almost 27 years ago when I was a teacher at a school in Lenasia. And ever since then, I've been at the Department of Basic Education. But it's good to see young people, and when I see you, I see potential, I see great expectation, I see hope. And thank you to the organizers of today's event. And I know the clock is ticking, so I must make sure that I do not talk too much. I've been asked to provide a kind of overview in terms of some of the pertinent and relevant issues relating to education. Now, just to let you into a secret, I completed my presentation this morning at about 6 o'clock because I was struggling in terms of what I should be sharing with you this morning. And then I have a daughter, and I asked my daughter just to look through it, and she said, "Dad, this is certainly not for these high school and university learners." And I said, I got up at about 3 o'clock this morning, Pastor Chris, and then to get my daughter to tell me, "Sorry, you've lost the plot here, Dad." So I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I'm going to have to do something. And I'm going to depend on the Lord's guidance in terms of what we're going to be talking about this morning. Now, firstly, I think what I want to share with you is what is my purpose? Why am I here in front of you? I want to share with you some of the essential or fundamentals relating high school. Most of you are high school learners. I think there's some of you that may be at university. And I believe that what I'm going to talk to you about, what goes on in high schools or secondary schools, will also assist you in terms of your journey in terms of higher education. This is going to be my outline. I'm going to start by asking the question, why am I at school? I'm going to tell you a little bit about the South African school context. Just a little bit of information so you understand that better. You need to know about the qualification that you are following while at school, the curriculum, the assessment, then challenges. This is where we are. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the qualification, the curriculum, and the assessment that you are confronted with every day. What are some of the challenges and struggles that you experience as learners in high school? And then COVID. COVID has been with us for 2 years. We need to understand COVID and its impact on schooling. And then finally, how do we deal, or some advice in terms of dealing with the challenges that you currently are experiencing. Now, education is a concept or a term that we must come to understand. And it's always good to start with a quotation from the father of the nation, Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela. And this is what he had to say: "Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world." Now, I know with all of you young people, you're energetic and you are having great dreams and expectations of how you can make a difference. And if you want to change the world, it starts with education. And let me also just remind you that the world is for the taking. The world is your oyster. Grab it. The question is, how do I do that? Then you have the secret and you have the answer. It's through education. Now, coming to this important question, why am I at school? And I know that there are various reasons some of you think as to why you are at school. Some of you would say, well, I'm there at school because it's the order of events. You're born, you go to kindergarten, you go to primary school, you go to high school, university, you get a job. So that's the sequence of events that life follows. Some of you may say, well, I'm at school because my parents think I should be there at school. Others possibly go to school because that's where I can socialize, I can make friends, I feel comfortable because I'm with my peers. Others go to school because they excel in sports and they are the heroes at school, the heroes of the day. Others say, well, the reason I go to school because one day I want to get a job, I want to have a wife, I want to have a family, a beautiful car, and that's the reason I need to get to school. And the others say, well, the reason I go to school is to learn, and possibly that's closer to the truth. And others say, well, I want to get to school to get to university. So you know why you are going to school. Now let me be honest with you. I was at school, but I didn't really enjoy school because for me, school was too stressful. It was the pressure to perform. And I'm hoping that I could have gone back to school and enjoy school for what it is designed. Now, the purpose of school, and just for your own background, I don't want to bombard you with too much of literature and information, but you go to school to develop your cognitive abilities. From the time you're a child to a primary school learner, the brain has to develop and you need to get to know the order of the world, the order of life, so that you acquire knowledge, but more important, you must acquire inquiry skills. It is very important that you go to school so that you could fit into the job market. Find a job, earn a salary, but also make a contribution to the economy of this country. You and I are fully aware that the economy of South Africa and the entire world is really at a low. So you could become an entrepreneur, a business person that could invent something exciting, have it marketed, and make a contribution to the economy. There are also political reasons why we go to school, so that we can learn to integrate, we can learn to respect other people's culture, understand the law, become law-abiding citizens. And there's also a social component to going to school. Learning to socialize, take on moral responsibility, and also, as a result of going to school, university, you not only learn to socialize, but also improve society in some way. Now, this is something that I want all of you to grasp in leaving this session today, is that in school, we need to create learners who can think critically and creatively, use evidence to support their solutions to complex problems, and communicate clearly. Now, the reason I want to emphasize this is because I think, and coming from the Department of Education, I'm being honest in admitting that I think we're missing the mark. We are not developing critical thinkers. We are not developing people and young learners who are creative. Those that can solve problems, problem-solving skill. Because the order of the day in most of our schools is rote learning. You're given a textbook, there's knowledge, you must absorb that knowledge and you must regurgitate the knowledge. So this is the fundamental purpose of education, and that which is learned must be evaluated on a continuous basis through assessment and exam. So as much as you detest examinations, examinations are there to be able to establish whether you are achieving this goal of becoming a critical, a creative thinker, a problem solver. Now, I'm sure you must have heard a lot about 21st century, okay? And we want to, in our schools, develop the 21st century learner. And the 21st century learner must have all of these skills. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is that you as this young learner will understand what you need to work towards. You are on this journey, and a 21st century learner must be an engaged thinker. And one thing you must continuously do is ask questions, be inquisitive, because that's going to develop the thinking capacity in you. We also want to, for the 21st century, develop ethical citizens. Learners who can differentiate right from wrong, who have the right kind of values and morals. Because it's senseless having somebody who is a thinker, but is going to create another nuclear bomb that's going to destroy the nation. But what is it that most countries need is entrepreneurial skills. Creating, inventing, developing business opportunities. And I'm only dealing with the three on the outside of this 21st century wheel, and you can look at all the other skills that you need to acquire because time is against me. So having said all of this, what am I saying? I'm saying that you as a learner, a learner at school must formulate your purpose. Because if you don't know why you are at school, then you're not going to make the kind of progress that is required. And in formulating your purpose, first and foremost, is you must tell yourself, I'm at school, I'm this young person, so that I can represent Christ wherever I am and whatever I do. Wherever I find myself, I'm going to be this little Christ. You're going to act, you're going to behave, and you're going to have the mind of Christ. I want to serve those around me. Service, not about yourself, but think more about those around you. And thirdly, pursue an ambition, pursue a vocation. And that must be your calling. That must become your passion. That must become that which drives you. Now, very quickly, what is the South African schooling context like? I thought it would be good. You are at school, you need to know, firstly, that we have almost 25 million, 25 million schools in the country. 25,000. We have 25,000 schools, 24,894. We have almost 14 million learners in the country. Now, of that 14 million, there are 700,000 that are in private or independent schools, and 13 million, the bulk of the learners, are in public schools. And you can then get the statistics in terms of the number of educators and between private and independent. And I thought this was important because some of you come from private schools and some of you come from public schools. And then I thought the other thing you need to understand is that if you're coming from a public school, our public schools are divided in terms of what is referred to as a socio-economic status. In order to be able to deal with schools appropriately, because in our country we have a major disparity or variation of schools. Good performing schools, poor performing schools. And therefore we have them in terms of quintiles, and you don't have to know too much about them, but what you need to know is that there are fee-paying schools and non-fee-paying schools. And your quintile 4 and 5 schools are your better performing schools. Your quintiles 1, 2, and 3 come from our more disadvantaged communities, and we need to deal with them accordingly. Now, if you are in school, you are either, well, none of you here are in the foundation phase, you could be in the intermediate phase, senior phase, or further education and training. Now, this is important because the entire schooling is organized in terms of these 4 phases, or what we refer to as 2 bands, the GET band and the FET band. Now, this is very important You need to understand that if you are at high school, you are pursuing what is commonly referred to as the matric. But the matric is the national senior certificate. That's the qualification. That's the certificate that you will get at the end of grade 12. The curriculum that you're following, that which you are taught, the subjects that you are exposed to, is the national curriculum statement. And some people refer to it as the CAPS, but that is the policy document, the curriculum and assessment policy statement. So all your subjects and what needs to be taught is contained in what we refer to as the curriculum and assessment policy statement. And then we have the assessments. It's the test, it's the assessment tasks that are administered on a continuous basis. But you need to understand that your assessment comprises of two parts. It's your external exams, which we are all concerned about, and then you have your school-based assessment, which is ongoing on a continuous basis, administered by your teacher in the classroom. Now let's get to the important part. This was by way of background, and I see I only have 9 minutes left, so I have to scurry down. It's fine, thank you. Now, as a learner, there are a number of difficulties and struggles that you are currently facing. And I've just tried to list a few of them. Now, what we've come to understand as the Department of Basic Education, that the type of school you are attending, whether it's a private school or public school, whether the school is in quintile 1, 2, and 3 or quintile 4 and 5, will determine the school environment. Now, some of you may be more fortunate in the sense that your parents have been better endowed, so they could get you to a private school. But most of our learners are in public schools, and the school you attend is determined by the locality or the community you are located. There are resourcing disparities. Some schools have better resources, technology, and the rest, while others don't. School culture and ethos differs from one school to the other. School management, your principal, your deputy principal are different, and that determines the school organization. Your teachers, you get competent teachers, and you get teachers of mediocre competencies, and you get poor teachers. So you may find yourself in any of these environments. Classroom sizes vary. And if you're in a public school in one of our more disadvantaged areas, you may be sitting with class sizes as high as 40 and 50 in your class. Now, another big problem in our school is discipline. And I don't think our teachers and our principals of today understand this new culture amongst our young people. And as a result, they are possibly administering the old kind of discipline to a new breed of learner. And that creates compounded problems in terms of discipline. And one of the biggest problems that we have in our schools is bullying. And I'm hoping that none of you are the victims of bullying. And more so, none of you are the ones that are doing the bullying. Now, but these are realities in our schools. And finally, drug abuse and alcohol abuse are on the increase. So this is where you find yourself as a young individual. Now, the other factor that we need to understand is COVID. COVID has been with us for 2020 and 2021, and we're still in the midst of COVID. And we found that enrollment in our schools have dropped. Don't worry too much about this slide. Attendance has dropped. 54% of contact time was lost in 2020. And 22% of the teaching time was lost in the, I think it was the second half of 2021. But what is more important is the last point, that there has been learning losses up to 70% of the year's worth of learning was lost in 2020. And you know what the researchers say? For every day of schooling that you lose 1.3 days of learning. So there's more learning that takes place than the time you are finding yourself in a school. Now, just to give it to you very simply, research was done and they found that learners in grade 4 in terms of home language are more than 1.25 year behind. In other words, if you're looking at grade 4 learners this year, they are 1.25 year behind. So in other words, they are effectively in grade 3. By the same logic, if you have gone to a school where there has been disruption and rotational timetable, you may be in grade 8, but in terms of your development and the learning that should have taken place, you are a grade behind. So I'm making this point very strongly so that you understand that you, as the class of 2021 or the class of 2022 in this particular grade, are dealing with an additional barrier compared to previous classes. And we are also finding that writing has become much less. In other words, the work done in your workbooks and the kind of homework that you're given has been reduced. Now, having said all of this and outlined what the challenges are, what is our advice to you as young people and as young people that are growing up in a Christian community? I think firstly, my first point is, you must take responsibility for your own learning. Your teacher is there merely as a facilitator. And if you want to be 10 times better, like Pastor George has mentioned, this is what you need to understand. I am going to be the master of my destiny. And I'm going to do that by taking charge of my learning. And how do you now take responsibility for your learning? Get a copy of this curriculum statement for your grade, for your subject. If you are in grade 10 and you're doing mathematics, you can download the topics, the content areas, even the assessment that you need to go through, so that you are ahead of your class and you must keep abreast of your teacher in terms of what needs to be done. So acquaint yourself with the content requirements. What are the topics that you're going to be covering? Understand the assessment requirements. Now you know that there's a program of assessment that your teacher will take you through during the course of the year. It normally comprises of assessment tasks, which the teacher will administer, and an examination or a control test. Now, very important is to look at past year papers. I mean, find out from your friends that were in grade 10 previously. I know in the case of grade 12, there's a lot that you can get in terms of the internet, in terms of websites that are presented by the different departments. But in other grades, go and look at past year papers in your subject, because that tells you what is important and what is going to finally be examined. The next point that I want to make is, after having taken responsibility for your own learning, conduct an honest reflection of where you are in your learning journey, in your learning process. Now, nobody knows you better than you yourself, not even your teacher. Tests may give the teacher an indication of your learning, but you know what your strong subjects are, what your weak subjects are. And if you have a weak subject, then that simply means it's an area that you need to focus on. Now, very important is the next bullet, which says, focus on the language of learning and teaching. We found that one of the big barriers to learning in our schools is language. Now, many of you that are seated here, English or Afrikaans is not your first language. It could be your second language, it could be your third language. But unfortunately, in the South African schooling context, English and Afrikaans are the language of learning and teaching. So you need to do what it is required to master the language of learning and teaching. Identify sections that you are struggling with in a particular subject, and finally get help. Talk to your peers. Talk to those that are possibly a grade ahead of you. Your elder brother, your elder sister or cousin, or whoever. Talk. Share your problems and your difficulties with those around you. And accept the fact that you are going to be confronted, or that you are experiencing learning losses through COVID, and it's no fault of your own. And I'm saying, go back a grade. Now, when I say go back a grade, I'm not asking you to go back to your school principal and say, I'm in grade 9, but please send me back to grade 8. I'm saying, if you know you're struggling with a particular topic in mathematics, then go back in terms of the curriculum or the curriculum statement and look at what was taught in the previous grade. Because normally, if you're struggling with mathematics in grade 9, it's simply because the foundation or that which preceded, that which came before grade 9 is not fully developed, and therefore you need to go back a grade. That's what I mean when I say go back a grade. The school curriculum for every subject, except in grade 12, has been trimmed. Now, this is something I'm telling you, and I'm hoping you're not going to hold your teachers to ransom. Now, from grade 4 to grade 11, in 2020, 2021, and 2022, the curriculum has been reduced, which simply means if you had 10 topics that a learner would have done in 2019 in grade 10, the number of topics has been reduced to 6. And this is what we refer to as the trimmed curriculum, or the trimmed, it's normally referred to as the ATP, Annual Teaching Plan. So you must just check with your teacher. Is he following the trimmed curriculum? Simply because there are many teachers who possibly don't even know that the curriculum has been trimmed and they're going with the original curriculum. There may be schools that are doing this. Now the policy is that you need to follow a trimmed curriculum. The reason I'm saying this is because you've had the disadvantage of losing parts of 2020 and parts of 2021, and you cannot be exposed to the full curriculum. And the next point you need to understand, and this is an important point, is that the assessment has changed. Now previously, if you were in, for example, grade 10, if you were in grade 10, 75% of your assessment came from the end of the year exam, and 25% came from the work or the assessment conducted by the teacher throughout the year. So the bulk, the main part of that which will determine your promotion was the external exam. But if you look at what I have here, grades 10 to 12, 60% of your determining whether you are going to be promoted to the next grade comes from your school-based assessment. In other words, the assessment conducted by the teacher. Remember, previously it was 25%, now it's 60%. So your teacher now plays a more important part in determining your promotion, your progress. But it's not about your teacher, it's about you. And I'm saying that you need to take these tasks that are administered by the teacher seriously, because that now plays a more important part. The same applies to those that are, for example, in grades 4 to 9. 80% of the assessment is now school-based. And 20%, in fact, in 2021 and 2022, we're not even talking about an exam. We're talking about a control test. So do you see that the assessment has changed? Now, I want to move towards closure, so I'm going to rush through these slides. I think you need to understand that in order for learning to take place, there must be teaching. You, as the recipient of that teaching, must go through this process of learning. But learning is something that takes place in your head. And the only way learning becomes visible is through assessment. So don't think that an assessment is this difficult task that I must go through. It's about there to determine whether you are progressing with your learning. And there's two types of assessment that we talk about. Don't worry about this complicated diagram. The one assessment is assessment that will help you with your learning, which is called formative assessment. And the other assessment is the summative, which is more the exam, which determines whether you can move to the other grade. So if your teacher is doing this continuous assessment, and it not necessarily be for marks, he could just be assessing just to determine where you are. Embrace that kind of assessment, because that assessment is about helping you to understand where your weaknesses are and what needs to be done to improve your own learning. Now, in terms of the last part, and I thought this was important, is that it ties up with what I said at the beginning, that you are at school so that you could become a critical thinker, a creative thinker. Now, very often, what happens in most of our schools, this is what is called Bloom's taxonomy. Don't worry about the big Bloom and all of that. But all I'm saying is, you must make sure as a learner that you are not just stuck at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of just acquiring or taking in knowledge. You must be able to move beyond just taking in knowledge to understanding what is being presented to you, and then being to apply the knowledge, analyze the knowledge, synthesize the knowledge, and evaluate it. Now, this is all a little bit too much to you, but I'm just giving it to you as an appetizer. In the future, I'm sure we'll have more time, and then we can talk more about this. And there are different kinds of taxonomies, which I'm not going to bore you with. And in conclusion, some very important policy matters that I thought I need to share with you. Firstly, that you must ensure, if you are currently in grade 9, that you make the right kind of choices when you are in grade 9 moving into grade 10. Because that is going to determine the stream and the type of subjects that will determine your future career. Now, there is what is called a vocational stream, which is more your technical subjects. Now, not many people, are interested in the technical, because there is this perception that the technical is for the weaker learners. But in our country at the moment, there's a demand for technical skills. So if your schools offers these technical or vocational subjects, go and investigate, find out more about them, and if you think you are suited in that direction, then follow the vocational stream. Something that I want to tell you, that you may have made your subject choices in grade 10. And then when you get to the end of grade 10, you realize, this geography that I've taken is too difficult. You can change subjects in grade 10 and in grade 11, but you cannot change your subjects in grade 12. So these are things you need to know about. But I'm not asking you to utilize the option, but if necessary, understand that you're not stuck in these subjects for the 3 years of grade 10, 11, and 12. Very important, do not allow your school to force you into maths literacy even though you want to pursue mathematics. And this is a big problem in our schools. You see, unfortunately, I'm going to admit it, our schools are working towards pass percentages. They want to get 100% pass, irrespective of what subjects learners take. So what some of our schools do, and our school principals, is that if they think that you are possibly a borderline case in terms of mathematics, they're going to force you to take maths literacy. Now, there's nothing wrong with maths literacy, but you need mathematics for a number of the subjects and fields of study for university. Just by the way, concessions and accommodations are allowed for learners with learning difficulties. And if you are a learner with a difficulty, there's nothing wrong with that. That's how God created you. So understand there is provision for concessions and accommodation. And if you're in grade 10 and 11, get to know the requirements for admission to bachelor studies at higher education. Get to know what are the requirements for a diploma study and a higher certificate. But these are things that we will cover in the future. Finally, in conclusion, I just want to say, pursue your purpose. Get to establish and formulate your purpose, and pursue your purpose with all that you have. Do not limit your potential. God created you because God creates no junk. So therefore you are special. And you can achieve whatever you set your mind on. Use failure as a learning experience. And don't think that if you've experienced failure, this is the end of the world. Failure is just a stepping stone to success. And finally, if you forget everything that I've said, remember D. Make Christ the center of all your plans, expectations, and experiences. And you will certainly succeed. Now, what I've done here, Pastor Mongezi, is there's a link with all the resources that you can obtain for your grade in terms of online support material. You will get the presentation so that you can click on that and you'll have access to all these resources. My apologies for having gone beyond the time. I really tried my best.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rufus. I think that was extremely informative, don't you think? It's empowering for you to know the system that you are in, the education system that you are in, and to know that the system is not there to get you. The system is not out there to get you. It's not there to trap you and to make your life miserable. As Dr. Rufus highlighted, that even though there was COVID and you've lost learning time and things with that, but there's been attempts to accommodate for that, like the trimmed curriculum, etc. So the system is not out there to make your life difficult, but learning responsibility is ours. When Dr. Rufus was speaking about something about, you may have even failed a subject. You may have failed something in term one. That doesn't mean you're doomed to fail it going forward. You can always improve. Albert Einstein, who's one of the great physicists and mathematicians, this guy was doing complex calculations even before the calculator was invented. He failed his entry exam into electrical engineering school. Einstein failed. Can you imagine that? He failed an exam. But it never stopped him pursuing what he wanted to do, and he went on, and today we are still studying his theories, and so much of life is understood because of it.